Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel on the impact of platform engineering. I'm your host, Heather Joslyn. I'm editor-in-chief of the New Stack. The New Stack is an online technology publication that explains and analyzes at-scale development of software and management of that software. And I've been at TNS since 2021. You can find us online at thenewstack.io. And today we've got a great panel here, and we're going to introduce them one by one, starting with Mallory Haigh. Mallory is Director of Customer Success at Humanitec. She has a background in customer support and success, full stack software engineering, engineering management, and she focuses on the strengths of the intersection of humans and technology. Perhaps she can give me some tips. And we're not, when not connecting people with their platforms, Mallory's an avid equestrian and hobby farmer, and also a cat and dog mom. We're also joined. Hi, Mallory.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great, and thanks for joining us. We're also joined by Vilas Veeraraghavan. He is Vice President of Engineering at Truckstop, which drives engineering innovations that benefit the transportation and logistics industry. He's in a previous life, he worked at Comcast, Netflix, Walmart, and building high-performance teams that focus their attention on automation, chaos engineering, CI/CD at scale, and improving developer productivity across the enterprise. Hi, Vilas.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And also joined by Nathen Harvey, DORA lead and developer advocate at Google Cloud. DORA's work enables teams and organizations to thrive by delivering industry-shaping, accessible, and actionable research. I know we write about that research a lot in the New Stack. He has co-authored multiple DORA reports on software delivery performance, and was an editor for 97 Things Every Cloud Engineer Should Know, published by O'Reilly in 2020. And actually, that's right on my stand next to my desk. I look at it often. Hi, Nathen.
Hi, Heather. Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Great. We're looking forward to having you. And Steve Pereira, he is CEO at Visible. Steve is obsessed with making tech human and leveraging it to deliver continuous value. In a former life, he's a startup CTO, agency consultant, systems and release engineer, finance IT manager, tech support, phone jockey, and pizza maker. All those jobs have in common that they're focused on the flow of work and value delivery. Hi, Steve.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, great. Well, let's get started. There's a lot to talk about. First of all, I'd like each of you. Let's start with Nathen. We'll go around. How do you personally define platform engineering, and how is it different than DevOps, or is it?
That's a really great question, Heather. I think platform engineering is really a socio-technical system that comes together to help use technology to deliver business value. That business value turns into customer value, or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure. But it's all about creating that great developer experience through collaboration, through minimizing cognitive load, through increasing flow, things along those lines. How is it not just DevOps by another name? Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that we all often get caught up a little bit too much in labels. And what really matters is that we're working together through collaboration, and it's more than just DevOps. It's more than just the platform engineering team and the application teams. It's the whole organization coming together to create value for humans. The flip side of that, of course, is that labels do matter. We can identify with our tribe, with our community by using these labels. So I guess at the end of the day, I don't really care what you call it, as long as it's something that is inclusive of everyone that needs to come together to drive that value.
Okay. And Mallory, how do you define platform engineering, and how does it differ from DevOps?
Sure. I think I agree with a lot of what Nathen just said, in that it's very much about that human experience. What I see platform engineering as is this natural evolution out of DevOps and out of the frustrations of DevOps, the frustrations of a lack of empathy for the human behind the keyboard, for the people that have to do the interactions with software engineering teams. I see it as a philosophy, realistically, and that's very much how we approach it. in advising customers on how to build a platform engineering practice every single day. For me, it really is, that intersection of humans and technology. It's about developer experience, it's about platform engineer experience, and kind of taking the friction out of dev plus ops. Very much organizational based, very much aligned on solving problems and being outcome driven. And I think that's really, for me, what separates it from this simple, you build it, you run it mentality that DevOps kind of evolved into. So, yeah.
Great. Steve, what's platform engineering to you?
I think I share a lot of what has already been said. I think that, to me, platform engineering is an abstraction of things that folks have tumbled into in DevOps accidentally by kind of reading the label on the box, but not necessarily understanding all the ingredients and the nutritional information and everything. You very easily kind of tumble into things like DevOps teams, or having a DevOps engineer on every team, or creating a shared services model. And I think that platform engineering introduced a useful abstraction away from those things, and basically said that instead of going to tap people on the shoulder or having them sit right next to you, you can create an interface, and to varying degrees, that acts as a buffer between folks who need something from infrastructure or resources or assets or delivery, and the folks who are charged with kind of putting that together and getting it in front of developers and useful to developers. It's also really benefited from product management, where DevOps kind of accidentally ignored that as well. That customer experience is a very real thing, even inside of companies. And so I think that it's really a specific practice that lives inside of the ecosystem of DevOps, but gets a little bit more specific about things that you could miss if you weren't really understanding what this was all about.
And Vilas.
I think for me, platform engineering and DevOps are two sides of a story, right? Like platform engineering enables and accelerates what you want to do with your DevOps practices. So I'm very actually very happy to hear very different perspectives here, but we're all aligning in that same sort of perspective, which is you need a way for developers to use tools. And for me, that's where the growth of platform engineering happened to begin with, is developers needed a way to do things in a much easier way. They needed a paved road. And that's where platform engineering came in. So for me, it's the combination of those tools, techniques, processes that makes developers' lives easier. That's my definition.
So if you implement you create this platform team in your organization, you create that paved road. You create that paved road, or golden path, as I've heard it sometimes called. What can be the impact within an organization, both, and let's go through, like, for developers, for operations engineers, for the business itself, and its ability to serve customers. Does anyone want to start unpacking that for us?
I can try and go first, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I'll also try and make it opinionated, so you can all jump in and start talking about it, debating me. So for me, I'm going to use a specific example. So back when we were at Walmart, one of the things we were challenged with for developer productivity was that we had too many areas, too many businesses that had different goals in mind for themselves. And so to create a platform engineering team, a vision even, the challenge that we had was to even align across businesses to say what the least common multiple was. Essentially, that would say, okay, all of these companies need this. All of these areas need this, right? At Walmart, they're basically companies within companies. And so just aligning on that was the challenge. And for me, the biggest benefit was when we created a single way for people to check in code, a single way for them to orchestrate delivering that code. And that created a massive impact within the company. So everyone who wasn't even believers initially started believing it, but you have to fight that one battle at a time. And so for us, it was the difference between waiting 2 days sometimes or 3 days, even with continuous delivery enabled, to go to something in production, all the way down to like 60 minutes or 30 minutes for something, going from idea to production in some cases, right?
Wow.
So that was the difference for us, and that took 4 years. But it was a journey that started with first understanding what is it that people really want to do in different varied businesses.
Does anyone have? I'd also be curious about like we talk a lot about why it's good for developers. What about operations and the back end? How does platform engineering? What kind of impact does it have on them when it's implemented correctly?
I think one of the things that Vilas sort of uncovered there, both for developers and for operators, is kind of some consistency around the platform, right? So from a developer perspective, if there's a consistent way for me to check in code and know what is its path to production, and that's consistent regardless of where I am, one of the things that enables is actually portability within the organization. So a developer could move from one organization or one part of Walmart to another part of Walmart, and they wouldn't be like starting from absolute zero, starting from fresh. They understand this is the process that we have. I think those similar benefits can accrue to the operations team. If we know that applications are always following this path, maybe they're always packaged in a common way, or we've got other commonality across applications, I think that can really help with troubleshooting, with monitoring, with managing the scaling up and down of those applications and so forth. So that consistency really breeds a lot of benefits for everyone.
So, because they don't have to, with operations, they're engineers, they're not doing the same repetitive task over and over again. For one thing, they're not developers. There's a limited number of standard group of tooling. They're not having to make those decisions all the time. What about the business side of an organization, the ability to serve customers? Does anyone have thoughts about that? How does platform engineering ultimately affect that aspect?
Yeah, I see this every day. So if no one minds, I'll jump in on that. I think one of the most important things about platform engineering is when it is done right, it has measurable impact, not just to technical parts of the organization, but to the org as a whole, as well as to their end users, their end customers. You can think about platform engineering as sort of this underlying way of driving value to everyone because of how it functions and because of the principles it applies. So, for example, if we take that developer pain point of having to wait to get something done and relying on other people all the time, once that's improved, you actually see an improvement in time to market. And who does that impact? That impacts the bottom line of a business. It's not just about developer experience and having the operations team feel, much less load on them. It's actually about the business as a whole. You get faster time to market. You get way better standardization, which increases security. And at the end of the day, the end user, the customer, is the one who benefits. We've even had conversations with our customers who've seen, an increase in potential investment because of the ability to be more stable, to get things out quickly, and to be more competitive through that. So it really does go beyond just developer and PE experience. And if you think about it that way, when you start the practice or you start the process and you start thinking about your outcomes, if you start up here, it's so much easier to be able to do the whole thing and link everything together. It all impacts each other, every single team.
What about you, Steve?
When I think about this in general, we're talking about economies of scale, right? And this is really something that tech has taken a very long time to figure out, that it's no different than any other part of the business, and all the same principles and practices apply. So you wouldn't have, an accountant in every single team in your organization. And if you had to do accounting multiple times a day in order to get your work done, you also wouldn't have two accountants who everybody is bugging constantly, right? So you build things and you take advantage of things like expensing platforms and billing management platforms, and these platforms exist everywhere in organizations today. It's just, everyone in tech likes to reinvent the wheel and, rethink everything from scratch. And I think it's taken us a long time to realize that platform engineering is just something that we should have always had. It's taken a while for the tooling to evolve, and an understanding that this is really another area of the business that just needs to be focused on flow and streamlining operations and leveraging economic principles. So I think really it's about building the ability to centralize some of your best talent, but protect them from being constantly interrupted by having them develop something that can be consumed on demand and self-service in varying ways. And it doesn't have to be a big bang investment. It can be internal, it can be external, it can be both. There's a lot of variation there, just the same way that you have variation in your your financial stack. Your tech stack is very similar, right? It's providing capabilities, and those capabilities need to have a degree of investment and experience and accessibility and all the other things that you demand from every other capability that you leverage in your business.
I like what Steve said. For just a second, I just want to say something that came to mind is when Steve was talking about building like tools. For me, what came on reinventing the wheel. What came to mind was you want to hit a nail into the wall, and every single time the team is building a new hammer just for their company, right? And that's exactly what has been happening, and it still happens. We're all in a job because we still work for companies where reinvention keeps happening, and we are stopping it and saying, why don't you use something that already exists? So I think that's a very powerful, important message to share.
Yeah, it prevents you from wasting resources on reinventing something that already exists. I was wondering if each of you would give me an example of, a platform engineering initiative that either you saw in your own organization or at customer organizations, and just get a sense of what the change that it made or the impact that it had on that particular organization. And was it developer productivity or less, for example, just a sense of how it the impact it had. I don't know who would like to go first. I'm gonna, don't make me choose. Don't make me choose by random.
I'll give you a general.
Okay.
So I've worked with a lot of companies on these inside and outside, and I think in general there's a lot of positive impacts to those incredibly valuable folks in your technical organization that are capable of delivering immense value and unblocking other people from burning out by, you kind of build them a storefront that they can sit behind instead of having them sit on a street corner and be, nudged and interrupted by everyone who walks by and needs something. They get hours of operation, they get some control over their environment and the interactions that they will have with people. There's a lot of benefits to that, and I've seen platform engineering efforts go from overloading those people and nearly burning them out and having them really go from being taken advantage of, right? Because they want to help and they want to be available, and they really really deeply feel the impact that having other people with problems and being blocked has on their teams and the organization, and giving them something where they can work at full capacity with full focus on creating something that does let's say 80% of what they would normally do, but with 20% of the impact on them, right? So they're able to enjoy their job more. They're pushed, right? I mean, they're using more of their skills. They're doing less repetitive work. They're attending less meetings. They're doing all of the things that they would like to do less of, and more of what they'd like to do. And that's actually not only beneficial on their side, but the customer side of that, the developers who are regularly feel bad about interrupting, know that they solved this problem already, but they can't quite remember how they did it last time. Or, they could do it if they only had permission. There's a million, ways that this kind of manifests itself. And it's just bad on either side when you don't have that abstraction of the platform that manages and kind of governs that interaction.
I can go next, if that's okay, Heather.
Yeah, absolutely.
So two examples come to mind. One, in my last job at Bill, we had the team work on improving the onboarding of new developers. The specific focus for us was, can we get a developer ready to check in code as soon as the first week that they are a part of a team? Obviously, there is a bunch of things you need from the team itself to say, hey, this is the focus area, there's some ramp up. But everything else, which means their laptop setup, they're able to sort of clone their repository, build it, and check in something just to test everything is going on. The PR goes through, like all of that, right? And we had a timeline of about 6 or 7 weeks on an average for even a staff level engineer who was coming in. Took 6 to 7 weeks sometimes to get onboarded and productive. And that's not unlike many other companies I've worked for in the past, right? And so we shortened that over time by making sure that we had a specific template of tools that are available for backend engineers and front-end engineers right in the laptop the first time they get it, right? And then we obviously streamlined our build process, all of that stuff. We got it down to less than a day. But that was essentially everything that they needed. Obviously, they need their own knowledge and the knowledge of the code base to do more. But theoretically, someone could check in the same day if they wanted. So that is something that I felt was a big win for it accelerated how quickly engineers were getting up to speed and submitting ideas. They felt less afraid of the entire, oh my God, I have to now learn 10 things. And the second thing that comes to mind is speeding up the CI/CD pipeline. Helped massively. For example, we had tests that used to run 3.5 hours sometimes because they were integration tests, massive tests. And by doing optimization, which is really like hard level, like system level engineering, we were able to get that down, parallelize and get that down to like less than 20 minutes, which means our time to go and fix something in production was less than an hour. And so we could really get really good MTTRs over the next like couple of quarters because we were able to really push changes really fast, fix forward really fast.
And was it also because were able to standardize what the developers are doing on the front end, so there were fewer flaws?
To an extent, yeah. So I think there was a couple of things related to that. So there was scaffolding we were providing, or a paved road that we were providing, saying these are the known good standards and policies that you want to do. If you are a backend engineer, and you want to use Java or Python or Go or whatever, one of those platforms, we had well-defined paths for you to get to production. That we would say, this is what you could use in order to get to production as fast as possible, right? And that would include guidance for even things like information security side of things. Like, this is how you could clear your security review in a day, right? Here is how you could do this in an hour if you wanted, if you use these templates, these well-defined templates. So yes, that was part of it, Heather, but we really needed the CI/CD pipeline to be fast enough after all those templates were followed to actually get to production that fast.
Mallory, did you want to say something?
Yeah, that's such a great story because it's so familiar to me and what we see. And I'll approach kind of our success stories from two different angles. The first is sort of that human side, and then second from kind of that business, that technical perspective. From the human side, I think one of my favorite conversations I've ever had with a customer, ever in any job, was with a Humanitec customer recently. a very senior DevOps engineer, and he came to me and he said, Mallory, this is the first time in 4 years I've been able to go to my kid's football game and not bring my machine and not sit on call and not have to worry about deployment failures or infrastructure failures. He said, like, I could just focus on my kid and his game. And that, for me, was why we do this. That was a really, really wonderful story. And I think those are the stories that come out of so many people who do platform engineering right. And on the technical side, we have a customer who very much wanted to move from this concept of being a financial services company to a fintech. They wanted to be leading edge. They wanted to show that financial services could be ahead of the curve technologically. Actually, they gave a talk here at PlatformCon, and it was absolutely wonderful to see. But what came out of their whole setup was that they were able to do incredible automated testing. They were able to get onboarded with new developers very fast. And my favorite thing that happened for them was that they were able to measurably see that their developers were now not working so much on refactoring and touching legacy software. Everything they were pretty much doing, save for maybe 10%, was new product, new development, new innovation. And for the business, that's fantastic. It's growing. It's got wonderful new investors behind it. And that is a true success story of not just the people side, but also the technical side. Just being able to go fully automated for most part and not rely on more than a few DevOps folks just to keep stuff maintained. It's really cool.
Nathen?
Yeah, picking up on a bunch of things, a bunch of themes there. I was working with a bank who's in their platform engineering journey. One of the things that they've done, they're a bank, they're highly regulated. The platform engineering team has said, we recognize that, and audits and compliance is a real pain for developers. So we're going to bake that into the system to make that audit process maybe not delightful, but at least easier to get through. And that goes back to like what Vilas was saying around security reviews happening very quickly now. If we think about how do we bring compliance and audit that everyone has to go through, no one loves, but can we build those controls into the platform and the audit trails into the platform so that when the auditors do show up, it's very easy to accomplish those goals. So I think that's a really, really impactful way to think about platform engineering and eliminating a lot of that cognitive load and toil that developers often have to go through. And then, of course, maybe we're more compliant, which is also better for risk that we have within the firm, better for our customers, lots of business value there.
Yeah, that's another hidden benefit, I believe, is ensuring compliance from the get-go. Now, developer productivity is notoriously hard to measure. McKinsey came up with some thoughts on it. I think last year we wrote about that. It was pretty controversial. But what metrics do you use to measure the impact of platform engineering in terms of developer productivity, in terms of its success in general, and how do you measure?
This is a big one, so we could spend the whole session on it. But I think that the constantly missing context is, what are the goals and constraints of the business? And then working backwards from that. Like, people try to do this from ground up and think about, how do I know people are busy, or how do I know that I'm getting the most out of my developer spend? And it's just an insane premise to sit a platform engineering or any kind of effort in your organization on top of. So I think that things like, Vilas's example of onboarding is a fantastic case. Like, think about the lead time for onboarding a developer. And, folks might think that only applies when you hire someone new, but it actually applies to every time you want to run a new experiment. You have to stand up the stack from scratch. You have to get refamiliar with what the latest, technology and best way to do something new is, which is essentially arriving at the context from scratch again. And, you might be coming from a product effort that was years long, and now you're changing context. So there's, new teams, new talent. These are all really, really consequential, and you don't get second chances at a first impression. So it's very critical that organizations get that right, because they bring their friends and they bring colleagues and they brag about how great it is to work at your organization. So if you want a real advantage, I don't think it's about trying to squeeze the last 10% of someone's time out of their day. It really is about unblocking them, right? And enabling them to be the best version of themselves, which means another aspect of that is like, don't force people to do 50 things when they're really good at 3, right? When they are experts at 3, maximize the amount of time that they get to spend on those things that they think they're really exceptional at. And so these things they're not impossible to measure, right? You can easily survey that and ask people that and collect that information and use it to inform decisions. But, in general, we look at things like DORA metrics and space metrics are great ways of kind of covering this question from different dimensions and in more consequential ways to the business than just like, are people busy and am I getting the most out of the talent? And then some things that folks don't think about are measure blocks, measure where people get stuck, right? Measure where people are stuck in meetings that they shouldn't be in, or, every time that they have to go interrupt someone to get help with something. Like, these are massively consequential and usually ignored in favor of things like lines of code and code reviews and everything that folks commonly look for.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, the time in meetings. I know that there have been studies of developer productivity that show people are spending an awful lot of time in meetings, and context switching is, difficult. You're not going to get the best out of somebody in those situations. Speaking of DORA metrics, Nathen, do you have some thoughts about developer productivity and how to measure the success of platform engineering?
Yes, of course I do. So certainly I believe that DORA metrics are a good way to help validate that your platform engineering efforts are paying off. You want to make sure that the teams that are building their applications on top of the platform are able to ship more often, safely, in a way that makes sense. And the reason you want to do that is because it allows us to run more experiments. And so how often are we trying to figure out what is it that our customers need? What can we learn from our customers? The best way to learn is to put new things in front of them and have that feedback loop so that we can understand what's happening. And I think that, DORA metrics in and of themselves are certainly not enough. You want to look at more things, and DORA would encourage this as well, but understanding the experience that your developers are having and what are they going through. And I think probably the most important thing when we talk about measuring anything is to remember, what are these measures for? And I would argue that they're to drive conversations so that we can find areas where we want to invest to improve. And so if you're measuring things and not making any changes based on what you're learning, if you're not investing in conversations that look at those metrics, if you're not building them into your daily practices, just stop. But they're there to help drive those conversations so that we can improve both our outcomes, but also the experience that everyone on our teams have.
And just in case anyone is not familiar with DORA metrics, you can Google it, but it's also, we've written about it a lot on our website, thenewstack.io.
Absolutely. You can also head over to dora.dev. You'll find everything that you want about DORA metrics there as well.
Excellent. Mallory, do you have some thoughts about measuring developer productivity and platform engineering?
Yeah. So we think a lot about it, obviously, because it's part of why people come to us specifically. And the way, we look at it, DORA metrics are fantastic. But like Nathen said, it's one part of the picture. We see DORA metrics taking a little bit longer to actually be show the impact than other metrics. So we consider them long-term. And I think that's the important way to think about them. They're very much a long-term trend type metrics. So what we've done is we started thinking about some other things that were a little bit more measurable right away. And honestly, probably one of the biggest ones is developer satisfaction. It's very subjective and it's emotional, but that's okay. We can talk about our feelings in platform engineering. And, you know, a rating between 0 and 10 of the processes before, or how you felt about your day-to-day before versus now after this. And I very often will say to teams, like, tell me what sucks right now. Tell me what you wish you could change. And then later we come back to it and be like, okay, what sucks now? Oh, nothing? Cool. All right. Or it's you know, it's changed. It's something, the next thing we need to work on. That's one. And one of the other things we wanted to really start looking at too was autonomy. How do we grade autonomy? So what we actually do is it's kind of a metric of time, and it's a metric of steps in a certain process. So if we look at a particular user story, something someone has to do, we measure the complexity of that step, and then we look at it later and say, okay, how is this now improved? It's an instant, able to be measured immediately once something is actually being used. It doesn't take as much time to be visible. So those are the sorts of things we've been thinking about. And we're realizing that they're very quickly able to actually show success.
Yeah, just piling on that for a second. DORA metrics certainly are a lagging indicator of sort of how your engineering process is working. They're also a leading indicator for what your business outcomes are going to be. But I also find, like, Mallory, you're spot on. The teams know what hurts. Teams know where the pain is. And I think this is also just another reason to bring in a practice like value stream mapping, and to bring a cross-functional team together and really understand what are all the handoffs, what are all the processes that we have to go through, where are the bottlenecks, because you want to go and attack those bottlenecks and alleviate them. And as you said, Mallory, once we alleviate that pain, there's going to be more pain behind it probably, but at least it'll be different pain, and we can go address that.
And also, you know, as when Mallory was talking about, you know, developer satisfaction, and I mean, obviously, happy developers and engineers are less likely to jump ship, you know, to badmouth your organization when you're trying to their friends who your organization is trying to hire. What does success look like? You know, assuming this initiative in an organization for platform engineering has been implemented, and what are the measures of success that you should highlight for each group of stakeholders, for the developers, for the C-suite, for the people that, you know, for the people who care about the business success of the organization?
So Heather, I'm going to take this one, start with this one, because I also feel that, and I was nodding my head at all the answers that you folks were talking about, because it all resonates with me. And I agree that with Nathen, DORA is, for me, more of an engineering efficiency metric. There is business metrics we always want to make sure that we lean onto. And I also agree with Mallory's perspective of the team needs to know they can do this job and wake up to like a really productive day. So it's really important that they look forward to it. And I had one more thing to share, Heather, before I jump into the value thing.
Absolutely.
Is because it comes from something that Steve mentioned, which is the onboarding win for us, for instance, was not just for the new engineers. So you were right about that. The biggest win we saw was people who were coming back to the team to refactor something that they touched 5 years ago. And they were like, I did not know it's this easy to come back and do this. So I'm excited. I want to make more changes and implement more ideas. So that is a big win. So I'm going to cue off of that into the question that Heather, you asked. For me, it has always been a question about, if we have an idea, if we come up with a thought, how soon can we get that to production? How soon can we make top line revenue goals achieved through that? Right. So there is a whole bunch of ideas in every company, and usually not all of them see the daylight. And so for me, that was essentially how I was challenging the value for, rather than saying providing more insight into the value for platform engineering was through that. And so just to be clear, we used to call it dev enablement. I continue to call it enablement because I feel like that's more in service of developers rather than dev productivity, which seems a little bit like you're extracting something from them, which is not the goal here. But for me, that is how I would advocate to the C-suite, is by using the ideas that essentially take these ideas to production. Like, how do we get this idea to production in the fastest time possible? Because that's what they are looking for. They're looking for, how do I make sure that the business can run faster? How do we accelerate on this journey? And mainly top line revenue. If it's not touching top line revenue, it's really hard for you to make that discussion really stick.
Who wants to go next? Talking about what success looks like.
I think that, back to what I said earlier, not to beat the same drum, but the businesses are economic organizations, right? So I think that there's a critical aspect of this that needs to be top of mind, where you're thinking about the value chain of the organization, all the way from your customer to those internal customers and back to, the contributors that are developing the capabilities that get consumed. And, you start to look at your organization as a network of capabilities, and, platforms being interfaces for those capabilities, for the consumption and production of those capabilities, and encapsulating those capabilities. And I think that good looks like not only integrity of that network, so almost like convergence of that network, right? You think about the internet as a network, it converges, and it's a group of different nodes that can all interconnect and deliver information from one place to another reliably. Organizations are delivering work and transforming that into value for end customers. And so I think, you have to really put strategy as the first stop on this journey, and think about what is the existing value chain in the business that might consist of individual people who get tapped on the shoulder for stuff, and think about, like, what are people going to those people for? What is the capability that's being created and delivered there? And how do we encapsulate that? How do we remove it as a bottleneck and deliver it as a service more consistently and more scalably? So for me, it's a question of creating a new view of the organization in terms of dependencies and capabilities and flow of work. And I don't see a lot of folks really at that level yet. But I think that's really where it clicks. That's really where you start to have incredible conversations, not only with business leaders, and you get people really excited about leverage and opportunities, and the pocketbook's open, and people start to understand how these individual contributions can really add up into ultimately what matters most to the business. Which takes us beyond, let's try this out, let's experiment, what if, you can start to craft business cases for these things that are very powerful and differentiating.
Nathen and Mallory, do you have thoughts about what success? Mallory?
Yeah, it's a lot of all the same things, and realistically, success is measured across the entire organization. It's about those outcomes, and if you set those goals in the beginning, those outcomes to be business focused, and you do things right, it's likely you're going to achieve them. Success also is just in people satisfaction, in human psychological safety. A psychologically safe organization is a happy organization, and it drives innovation and it drives success. So that would be the one thing I would for sure add on to the business case, as well as the technological case success measurement.
I want to say one thing. Sorry, Nathen, before you go ahead, I want to say one thing that Mallory pointed out here, which is that psychological safety piece, right? I just want to be very mindful of saying that platform engineering is not the only way to achieve that psychological safety. But platform engineering does provide the ability for developers to feel much more safe about what they're working on, because they feel that it's achievable, instead of feeling that cognitive load, like there's no way I can get to it. But I do want to point out, like, there is more ways that, and people should discuss that separately, not in this discussion, but there is more ways to achieve that. Platform engineering is not the only way. But yeah, thanks.
And I just want to jump in before Nathen finish us off here. Psychological safety, of course, meaning you can speak up in your team without fear of retribution. You can speak your mind, and which is important in solving any problems. Everyone being able to speak up with their ideas. Nathen.
Yeah, sure. So just coming back to like, what does successful platform engineering look like? I think just echoing what everyone has said and maybe putting a little button on it. It's about getting the organization aligned and driving that alignment and engagement across the organization. We're all working towards the same goal. That goal, hopefully, is happy customers. And so when we can see and we can feel that alignment, or maybe we can feel when our teams are misaligned, that always pops out. So you'll start to see your organization much more aligned towards achieving those goals. And that leads to much more engaged employees that have higher job satisfaction, less burnout, and an environment with psychological safety is a great way to help get there.
Vila, did you want to?
Yeah, I had one more thing that I want to share, which is,
Okay.
I think the theme for me that I'm hearing from everyone is you cannot invest and do platform engineering for the sake of just doing platform engineering. Like the goal is really moving the business forward, giving your devs like the safe space for them to really work, the productive space for them to really work. Right? Like I think that's how I see it, and I think platform engineering by itself would die out if you're not really helping the business.
And with that, we'll wrap up. I want to thank Nathen Harvey from Google Cloud, Mallory Haigh from Humanitec, and Steve Pereira from Visible, and Vilas Veeraraghavan from Truckstop. And this has been Heather Joslyn from the New Stack, and thank you very much for joining us. And on to the rest of PlatformCon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.